Welcome to the London Climate Action Week webinar from FX today. We are just waiting for some people to join, so if you just bear with us for a second and we'll be started in a moment. I'll wait to introduce our panelists because if you're not in for the first 10 seconds, then you tend to miss them. So, but I'm sure Julie will also post those in the chat function so everyone knows. Good. So welcome to our webinar today. The theme for today is fueling the UK's clean energy revolution, but specifically how communities are taking control of their energy generation for the benefit of all. And I've got a brilliant cast around me today. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to everybody, and then we'll, hi Steve, and then we will get stuck in. So just a bit of housekeeping. We have an hour for the session today. Steve, if you could just mute for a second, that'd be great. And we'll be talking to some specific businesses and some people who are involved in the doing and the innovation, as well as some of the policy side of things. We will take questions via the chat function if you want to put them there, or I'll feed them into the discussion, or we can run them as a quick Q&A at the end. And also, this isn't a specific financial promotion at all, and we can't answer any specific questions relating to your own personal financial circumstances, but we will send through some additional resources after the session if there's any outstanding questions or some good follow-up. So without further ado, to join me today, we have, if everyone could just give me a quick wave, Duncan Law, Community Energy England, Barbara Hammond, Low Carbon Hub, Steve Shaw, Power for People, Adrian Ramsey, MCS Foundation, Matthew Clayton, Thrive Renewables, and Colin Baines, Friends Provident Foundation. Welcome everyone. A packed agenda and also a packed panel. So let's get started. Well, obviously the backdrop to this is that Boris announced his 10-point green plan just a few days ago, which gives some concrete steps to moving forward to a low carbon transition, which we all have been working on here for quite some time. So I think we're all very pleased to see that, although we probably would have liked to have seen that some time ago. However, we can talk about that in a bit more detail. And the important thing to note is everybody on this panel really is advocating the combination of moving to a low carbon economy with giving communities to take the power into their own hands, whether that be via community energy companies, whether it's via people-owned energy suppliers, but basically to spread the value across our entire population. So I'd like to get straight into it and talk a little bit more about that. So let's first of all just highlight for everybody what the challenge is that we're facing at the moment and what the problem is. So I'm going to ask Colin from Friends Provident to just open up for us and give us a view of why climate change is a particular strong focus of Friends Provident and how you're seeing the landscape at the moment. So over to you, Colin.
Okay, thanks. Well, I don't think anybody needs to be told really that business as usual risks climate breakdown, profound consequences for people and planet really. So at the foundation, our sort of charitable objective is a fair and sustainable economy. And obviously this is a prerequisite. Sorting out climate change is a prerequisite to having any sort of economy, really. And we view climate change as a eco-socio-economic issue, not just purely an environmental issue. And that brings in these sort of community issues into the heart of how we address climate change, really. We have a particular focus on energy. No sector of the economy potentially has ever faced such disruption as the energy sector right now. So what was a very sort of safe, comfortable sector for the big incumbents of large centralized generation down to passive consumers, and they control the whole value chain all the way down. They will all acknowledge now that those days have gone, and that there's an increasing role inevitably for distributed, smart, flexible, and participatory energy. So, you know, the days of passive consumers are going as people generate their own energy, store it, you know, get involved with demand management, all of these sorts of things, getting into being involved in local energy markets. There's a long, long list of how former passive consumers are now active participants. And guess what a challenge in this is to ensure that nobody gets left behind in that transition. So as richer consumers sort of become less reliant on the grid and have on-site renewables and things like that, that actually those costs end up piling up on those least able to afford it. So we view community energy as having a really important role in making sure no community and no people are left behind in that transition. So,
that's great. Thanks, Colin. And that really sets the context, I think, for the discussion and for everybody to be involved today. And Adrian, so MCS has seen obviously a number of years of the development of the renewable energy sector now. What developments are you seeing within the sector? Have we gone far enough? How much further do we need to go? And then we'll come on to Steve, who can give us the perspective from, you know, what the current barriers are and how we need to change things to make it more participatory.
Well, I mean, it's a really good question, Lisa, and the renewables market has developed dramatically in the 12 years since MCS has existed. So today, MCS is owned by us as MCS Charitable Foundation. We're an independent charity that runs research, policy, advocacy, grants giving to accelerate adoption of renewable energy and low carbon solutions. We now own the MCS standard scheme for building scale renewables, and for most of its history it was under government, and we have the data from the 12 years of installations of building scale renewables, sometimes known as microgeneration, which really tells us about those trends. And I'll give you a few highlights now, and I think it's a story of two halves really, because on the one hand the industry has transformed and grown and developed dramatically in that 12 years, particularly on the electricity side around solar PV, where we have a much more established market, many more businesses and installers operating effectively. The installation costs have come down for people installing solar PV in their households, can now get, you know, pretty good payback periods in terms of financial return on investment. So the market has matured. However, what we have seen in terms of the policy framework behind that from government is very much a start-stop approach. So initiatives like the feed-in tariff have come in that have resulted in the market growing dramatically, huge increase in demand over a couple of years, and then those policies have suddenly gone away. And we've seen that start-stop approach over a long period. And my fear is that we could be seeing that again now with policies like the Green Homes Grant, which the government introduced, and we welcomed it in principle, for householders to install both insulation and also clean heat, like heat pumps and solar thermal. And initially it was a project, a grant that was only going to run for 7 months with 2 billion attached to it. It has now been extended by a further year, which is great. So people have got till March 2022 to use that voucher scheme to install heat pumps, insulation, etc. in their properties. But what we haven't got is the long-term policy framework that's needed, and the associated investment in skills and training that's needed to really ramp up the level of installations at the scale that is demanded. I mean, this week's announcement, the government's talking about getting to 600,000 heat pump installations per year, heat pumps being the established technology ready form of clean heat through electricity for homes. And that 600,000 is probably 20 times the levels of installations we have at the moment. So dramatic change, but probably only half the level that we need to get to the net zero target. We really need to be at 1 million installations per year by the end of the decade. So the ambition's growing, but it's not growing quickly enough. And it doesn't yet amount to a clear, comprehensive net zero plan. So we want to see long-term policy frameworks that give confidence to businesses to invest and are underpinned by a skills and training framework, because we all know that there's a huge jobs and economic benefit to this, as well as, of course, the carbon benefit in how we build that better.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. That's really helpful. And Steve, coming to you, what do you think still needs to be done from your point of view in terms of the problems with the current system and breaking down barriers?
Well, I think the real reason why we're just not going fast enough in the right direction, and I like what Adrian just said. We are going in the right direction, but that's not really important if you're not going fast enough, because of the urgency of needing to address the climate crisis. And I think the biggest reason in terms of energy and in terms of community renewable energy is because the rules and the regulations that govern our energy system and our energy market are still largely those that were designed in the 1990s when the energy system was privatized. The government accept this themselves. A recent adjournment debate that we had held in the House of Commons saw the Energy Minister Kwesi Kwarteng, in response, acknowledge exactly what I just said. We need to reform these rules significantly. And what we're doing is we're campaigning for a bill, a new law that would actually do that. It would empower us all to be able to buy directly from local communities' renewable energy generators, rather than at the moment where obviously we buy off nationally licensed utility companies. And what this would do is unlock what the government said was possible back in 2014. It said in a 2014 report that by now we could have 3,000 megawatts of community renewable energy generation in the UK, but we've got less than a tenth of that. So we haven't even realised over the last 6 years what the government said was possible. And there's lots of evidence that it should be far more than that. I think the context is really important here. At the moment, community renewable energy generation in the UK is less than 0.5% of our total electricity generating capacity. So it's absolutely brilliant what is happening, but it's just not enough. And we have to change the rules. If we don't change the rules, then nothing will change.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Steve. And Duncan, as head of Community Energy England, tell us why this is so important, and or one of the directors, I should say, and tell us more about the work that you're doing.
Thanks very much for the promotion, Lisa. I'm policy and advocacy manager, which means I deal a lot with Westminster. And as Steve was saying, we need things to change at the central level for the huge powerhouse for the energy transition to get engaged. The Committee on Climate Change is completely clear that we cannot achieve zero carbon without engaging the consent first, and then the active participation of the people, because the changes that we need over the next 10 years are so huge. Adrian mentioned heat pumps. We need to insulate houses. That is disruptive. People need to change their behaviors. They need to acquire and accept and understand the benefits of a new way of doing just about everything. And community energy is absolutely key to that. We would say that it's fundamentally essential to achieving net zero, because it is the grassroots experts embedded in their communities who are passionate about energy, can build the relationships, can turn the problems into solutions, can engage with the people to encourage this rolling transition. I suppose I should start by saying what is community energy? Fundamentally, probably everybody understands, it's just people getting together to do energy things in their community. And it's not all about generation. Increasingly, as all the blocks have been put in place by central government, it is not about energy generation, because it's very difficult to make a business case to do that. So people are turning to often what they were doing before, energy efficiency measures, innovation projects, energy education, flexibility, multiple solutions, storage with EV charging, and so on. It's extraordinary, the diversity of the 300 organisations in England and Wales, what they're doing. And it's fundamentally about a community and cooperative way of doing things where the people have ownership and control, and there's no profiteering, and social benefit is the big motivator. And the benefits are huge. As I've mentioned, the agency that is acquired by the community by having control of a system, the ability to do behavior change, a proportion of the profits that are dedicated to community benefit, often around energy, resource efficiency, increased resilience, fuel poverty work, community test-bedded innovations. If you do an innovation in a community, you know whether it works or not. It's not in a lab. And then all the sort of multiplier effects of doing things locally.
Yeah. So why don't we, in fact, a lot of those things that you've mentioned and some of the innovations have been demonstrated by some of the organisations on the panel today. So I'm going to ask Barbara to give us a potted history of the Low Carbon Hub and just tell us about some of the different work that you've been doing, and then Matthew, a slightly different model from Thrive Renewables, who can also talk about how they're democratising the large-scale portfolio of renewable assets that they hold. So over to you, Barbara, first. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So the Low Carbon Hub is a group of social enterprises that works in Oxfordshire. We take investment from anyone, anywhere, and put it to work in Oxfordshire. Our model is all about how you generate, as part of that investment, money that is a community benefit profit after you've paid shareholders their interest and their capital, and putting that community benefit profit to work. And when we say work, we really mean work. So last year, the leverage on our community benefit profit was we made £100,000 of that and turned it into nearly £1.5 million of activity in the community to make these changes happen. And I would really pick up on what the previous speakers have been saying, that community energy is very good at innovation, actually. And a lot of our leverage is about using our money to match against innovation funds to do new things. And just putting that into a little bit of context, when we started in West Oxford voluntarily back in the pre-feed-in tariff, we did the first third-party leased solar roof in the UK that was then picked up and taken large by many others. When we started up the Low Carbon Hub, we had the largest solar PV roof in the UK that was a whole 100 kilowatts. And we've just got a share offer now for the largest community-owned ground mount in the UK. And we're using that ground mount project is part of a really revolutionary project that is funded partly by Innovate UK. It's part of the government's Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. They're prospering from the Energy Revolution programme. we're working with SSEN, both universities, 2 of our local councils, a number of small SME startups to work out how you get all of those electric vehicles, how you get all of those heat pumps onto the network at the most local level, at the low voltage level, and still have a grid that works without having to invest a humongous amount of money in just upgrading, getting ever fatter wires and bigger switches to make it all work. Because the fundamental thing about this, and what's so important about community energy, is that energy revolution, quite apart from the offshore wind, which is amazing, but quite apart from that, all of this stuff is going to happen right inside people's houses or on their doorstep. Right inside all of our local businesses and institutions or on their doorstep. It is about getting transport and heat electrified right where it's right where everyone lives and works. And we need to power that as locally as possible. And we need to work out how to join all of that stuff together so that we can balance the grid and really get people working together collaboratively to use all of that stuff flexibly. And it's quite right. Ofgem is currently managing the energy system for the past rather than the future. That needs to change. And we really hope that Project Leo and the other 3 smart energy demonstrators in the UK can start feeding in the results of all of our work to prove that that's possible.
Right. Lovely. Thank you, Barbara. I think that gives us an excellent overview of your work so far. And Matthew, you obviously have a portfolio of different renewable assets, which speaks to some of the diversity that Barbara was talking about there. Can you just give us an overview and how you've structured everything before we start talking about the different finance models?
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Thrive Renewables is, in its simplest sense, is a renewable electricity generation company. But what makes us a little bit different is our ownership structure. So right from the outset, 25 years ago now, we set ourselves up as a PLC with the principal purpose of allowing individuals to play a role in the transition into the energy system in the UK. So over the last 25 years, we've now built 120 megawatts of projects. That's been wind, solar, hydro, been involved in tidal, in heat projects. So a whole range of solutions that we see as part of the transition. But really importantly for us, we now unite a crowd or a community of over 6,250 individuals who've come together, invested in us, entrusted their capital with us, and we've gone out and built the portfolio with their capital. And what we're really proud of within that is that range of investors is everything from £5, so a £5 investment, up to £5.5 million investment. So at one end, it's an individual who just wants to do something with their capital, right the way through to impact funds that see us as a way of sort of delivering both socially and environmentally through bringing those communities together. And I guess that community feeling is at sort of 3 different layers within the business. So there's the underlying portfolio of generation assets and the access we give individuals to that. Each of our average investor is generating enough electricity for themselves and their 8 neighbours. They're offsetting enough carbon for 2 or 3 people through the portfolio they're investing in and the contribution they're making to that. But we also try and invest in a very sort of in a very conscious way, I guess, where we've got joint ventures that have been running with community groups for over 20 years now. We're embarking on that at the moment, and there's some new funding models that are out that we're working with and deploying at the moment to really help communities grapple with the revenue uncertainty which has come out of the end of the subsidy regimes. But we also just try and be a good neighbour. Our investors have confidence in us. During the COVID crisis, we've put together a COVID hardship fund and deployed capital into food banks and schools and whatnot in the areas around our wind farms and and hydro projects. So yeah, I think for us it's about being a really transparent way for people to make a difference, so they can put, if they don't own their roof, they haven't got a roof which takes solar panels, then they can invest in us, and we'll make sure that capital gets out the door and starts generating electricity.
Yes. Okay. And both of you and Barbara have talked about the community ownership part of this, and that is allowed through different mechanisms for people to invest from small amounts to large amounts in both organisations. Barbara, what has the crowd done for you in terms of enabling you to take on this huge task, and for you to build this long-term strategy?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Lisa. For us, it's very important to be working in a really deeply embedded way in a place, because there's so much that we've got to do. And one of the things that Project Leo has taught us is that big organisations don't really know the patch very well, and we bring all of that. So our shareholders become part of our network, that's part of a whole enabling environment in Oxfordshire, and which helps us to work with key institutions across the county to really build an innovation ecosystem that allows us to move very quickly when there are opportunities, and allows us to work in a very strategic way together. And so we draw on our investor members a lot. We put calls out a lot to them. And we generally find that if there's something that we need, there's somebody there who either can help us themselves or put them in contact. And that enabling environment is just such an important part of getting to what Duncan was talking about in terms of leaving no community behind, leaving no person behind. You need really detailed local knowledge, and everybody wanting to collaborate together to make a difference in what they perceive to be their place. Locally based institutions and businesses are hugely important to that.
Yeah, great. And Matthew, I'm assuming that perhaps because of the scale of some of your projects, you've gone for more of a hybrid approach, potentially using, I'm not sure whether it's commercial debt or crowd-funded debt alongside crowd-funded equity. How has that blend helped you to achieve the portfolio that you hold?
Yeah, well, I guess what's absolutely crucial to us is that confidence in the alignment of purpose, in that we're achieving two things. We're building more renewable capacity, and we're allowing individuals to participate in that. And we could look at that through quite a narrow lens. Let's raise capital ourselves, go out and build more projects. But what we're really keen to do is to extend that further through something that we've been doing over the last couple of years since 2015, 2016, is what we call a community energy funding bridge. So we're conscious that there's the removal of the subsidies has a number of impacts on an energy project. I guess the first one is the reduction in revenue certainty going forwards, and that has a knock-on impact on the amount of sort of bank debt, effectively. So the least cost debt or the least cost capital, effectively, that projects can access. So that puts more onus on equity and the crowd and the community participation in those schemes. But those steps can be quite big. If you're building a 5 megawatt solar farm or a 3 megawatt wind farm, those steps can be quite big. You need to mobilise 3, 4, 5 million pounds, which is a difficult thing for a community to do in one bite. So what we aim to do in terms of that play a facilitating role, where we can come in and provide funding, which then provides the community energy group or the crowd group with two things really: a bit of expertise along the way, but also the time to go out and raise their funding through through and perhaps a number of capital raises, or accessing community engagement in different ways. And we've seen that with there's a project in Meanmore called Meanmore, which is in Cumbria. It's a wind farm in Cumbria, and there was a very active community group really wanted to build or to acquire a wind farm which neighboured one of their existing wind farms. And what we were able to do was put the 7 million on the table straight away to get the project into the community hands. And then over the following 2 or 3 years, that those community groups have then done multiple capital raises to basically repay us and take us out of the equation. That to us is success, because the capacity is there, it's generating, and the ownership of that project has been democratized. So yeah, it ticks a number of boxes.
Right. And Adrian, you and I have been working together to put together a what we're calling a co-investment scheme as well, haven't we? Whereby you'll be investing out of your capital funds into community energy projects and other low carbon technologies. Can you just tell us about that and why you decided to do that?
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Well, it's a partnership we've announced this week, isn't it? So hot off the press. And I know the People's Postcode Lottery are doing the same. So I think what we're doing is trying to accelerate a growing trend for foundations to invest part of their capital funds in initiatives that directly deliver their mission. So for us, that's about renewable energy and green technologies. And really, there's a triple win for us in doing that. We're able to use capital funding to invest in initiatives that directly reflect our mission. We also will, because it's through a crowdfunding platform, through FX, we're able to then help unlock and encourage individual investors to invest following on from that. And I know your research, Lisa, suggests there's a multiplier effect of around 3 times the level of funding. So for our initial 500,000, should be around 1.5 million coming as a result of that from individual investors, because we help, can give the confidence and through the seed funding. And then the third benefit is that it also generates a financial return back to us to support our core work as a charitable foundation in our grant giving, in our research and advocacy work. So multiple benefits, and it works for us, but we also see ourselves as playing a leadership role within the foundation sector, alongside the People's Postcode Lottery, who've done the same thing, to really encourage other foundations to look for different models of social investment. And for us, this particular model appealed to us because of the potential to unlock further funding from individuals at the same time. What's great about it is this is in addition to our core work around grant giving and leading community capacity building and growth of skills and research in the sector for our mission around net zero in homes and communities. Because it's capital funding, it's in addition to that, and actually, given the state of the stock market, the types of levels of return we'll be expecting are just as good as we'd get from somewhere else. So there isn't really anything to lose, and we think it's a growing trend for foundations to use capital funding in this way. Yes,
great. Capital at risk. Yes, just someone's made a point that John Taylor, working for the Rural Community Energy Fund, £10 million of grants available across England to support feasibility and development costs of rural community energy schemes, which is absolutely excellent. And Colin also has been investing and providing grant funding within this climate change sector for some time now as well. So, and starting to do some quite innovative things. Colin, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we describe ourselves as a capitalised charity. So we use all of our capital to try and achieve our mission. Now, historically, perhaps a grants giving charity, and we still give grants. On the grant side, we give funding to innovation, really. So we've been lots to talk about innovation. Also talk about systemic barriers to community energy, sort of deliberate government interventions that have somewhat undermined the growth of the sector. So our grants are for innovation, for new models, post-subsidy models, and things that basically the whole of the community energy movement can learn from, develop new, better models, and we can basically get past some of these government barriers. We've given grants to all sorts of things. I guess a couple of the current ones are things like the Power PERD, as an example, Forum for the Future. So what they're doing is joining up institutions that have property or land that are willing to host community energy projects with prospective community groups that want to take that forwards. So, you know, that's taking out a big chunk of time and resources that it takes community groups to actually get going in this space, finding a site, getting agreement with the landlord. Is the site suitable, etc. So you're taking out a big chunk and making it a lot easier, and you're reducing costs. That's one example of the kind of thing we're giving grants to. We also gave a grant to riding sunbeams, and this ties into our investment in the space as well. So we also undertake impact investments with particularly high social and environmental returns. And frankly, there is nothing that provides higher social and environmental returns than community energy does. We kind of view it as the center of a Venn diagram of community issues, environmental issues, local and social and local economic issues. It kind of ticks so many boxes that any sort of institution wanting to put their capital to work for charitable objectives, there's probably something in community energy that would attract them to investing in this space. So just, I mean, Egni Co-op is one of ours that's currently rolling out the largest solar project in Wales. I think it's 82 sites. I think we've just hit 4 megawatts. Lots of council buildings, university campuses, primary schools, etc. And those smaller sites are receiving the energy for free. Another one is riding sunbeams. We actually gave a grant to riding sunbeams as an innovative idea. They had this idea of connecting and electrifying the railways with renewable energy provided by community-owned trackside renewables and potentially wind as well. So, you know, great idea to get over one of the major barriers to community energy, which is access to market. So you have private wires to the railway network to get over that particular hurdle, and PPAs as well, long-term PPAs with the railways for, you know, however many years of guaranteed income from those two projects. Two massive barriers to community energy getting off the ground in a big way. So private wires, PPAs, and technical expertise, all sorts of things. Riding sunbeams can come in as that kind of middleman. Yeah. So initially it was a grant. Then once they proved it was feasible, and they've run a demonstration project at Aldershot Station, now we invest for a ownership stake. So we invested £100,000 for 5% equity. And it's that kind of stage where for the next 12 months, it needs to do a lot to get to commercial sort of viability. So our investments will be used to bridge that space. And we're willing to accept sort of lower returns or higher risk for a massive social and environmental impact, which is what it would bring. A key role to play in the just transition as well, because it's enabling large energy users to add local economic and social value to the communities they operate in, whilst also decarbonising. So it ticks all these wonderful boxes. So that's why we got into that in a big way.
Great, thanks, Colin. And I really want to bring Steve into this, who's been waiting very patiently. And so we've established that there are lots of different models which are being rolled out. There's lots of innovation. We feel as if there's lots of funding mechanisms that can support these schemes, and we're seeing innovation in financing as well, I think, which is great. So how do we go to replicate this across the UK in the current policy environment, or do, you know, how much do we need to change the current policy environment to get to that much bigger strength of position, I think, that community energy really deserves in the UK. And there was a question, perhaps you can feed this in, Steve, to your sort of comments on that. If electricity suppliers were no longer allowed to buy REGOs without the electricity, would that boost community generation? Not sure if that's something you can feed into your answer. If not, just crack on and tell us your thoughts and vision for the future.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Lisa. So we're campaigning to change the law because it's very clear that if community energy groups could sell directly to local households and local businesses, then all the good things that we've just heard about could be expanded by many, many times over. That government report I mentioned earlier, written 6 years ago, that was showing that it could be 10 times bigger than it currently is. But that report was also very clear that it could be many, many more than 10 times bigger. So, you know, imagine if all these great things that we've just heard about could be 20 times more across the UK. It's also desperately needed. And so that's why we're campaigning to change the rules of the market. The bill that we're campaigning for, the local electricity bill, it would give Ofgem a duty to establish a right to local supply, which would then empower community energy groups to sell their energy directly to local customers. The real barrier at the moment is basically insurmountable costs, set up and running costs. And part of this new right to local supply that would be established in law would give Ofgem a requirement to make sure that costs became proportionate. The analogy I give to MPs is imagine that you wanted to set up a microbrewery and you were going to brew local beer, and then you were going to deliver your beer to local cafes and restaurants. But then imagine when you came to register your one delivery van, you found out that it was going to cost you £1 million a year towards road tax. It's impossible. The local business can't work under that system. You could only make it work if you were a national supplier of beer on the first day of your business's operation. That's currently the situation we've got in terms of energy supply. So we need to reform that, and only changing the rules will do it, which is why we are campaigning for legislative change. The good news is the campaign's going well. There's 228 MPs supporting this bill now. This is well over a third of the House of Commons, really good broad cross-party support as well. Over 100 Conservatives on it. So, you know, we're going well, but experience tells us, my background's in parliamentary campaigns. I worked on the campaign that got the Climate Change Act through Parliament, amongst other things. First campaign I worked on was for the Doorstep Recycling Act, which is why we all put up the weekly collection for recycling. So, you know, these campaigns work, but we need well over a majority of all the MPs in Parliament. So, you know, we're going well, but we're obviously going to need more people to help. So, you know, if anyone wants to get involved and write to their MP, that would be great. Just go to our website and sign up. So yeah, that's what we really think is needed. We're not claiming that this will fix all of the problems and make community energy, you know, a perfect paradise. But I think it's the single most important thing that could be done in order to see the potential for community energy realised.
Yeah, lovely. And Duncan, yes, I was going to ask you to come in and add on top of that, please.
Just to say what Steve's doing, and the bill is brilliant, but as he says, it's not the end of the game, because the supply market is incredibly difficult and it's high risk and it's low margin. But it is a huge part of the solution. But immediately, what we need to do is to change government attitudes to what are the solutions. At the moment, as we see in the 10-point plan and Boris's orations, he sees the answer as big tech solutions. The fact that all our electricity needs will be met by the winds that blew Drake across the seas. I'm afraid unless we have people insulating their houses and doing behaviour change and changing the way we use electricity, that simply will not be realisable. And they don't get that. So my broken record in the direction of government is you must put people and communities at the core of energy, climate and recovery policies. Because if you don't, you will fail. And at the moment, we're getting more traction, but we're not over the lip where it actually gets written or spoken about. So please echo our responses to the 10-point plan. It's on our Twitter feed. It's basically that he's forgotten that these things need investment. Community energy doesn't need much. It needs a welcoming, enabling policy environment with people at BEIS and in the government who care and will help. And it needs a certain amount, not huge amounts, a certain amount of financial help to get us over the threshold so that we can make a business case. Once we can make an investment case, the investment comes flooding in and we convert development funding to patient capital at an unparalleled rate compared with the industry in general. So we just need that help to get over the threshold into viability. And then there will be the thousands of people around the country who are desperate to help with the energy transition, will be the government's allies rather than going away and joining XR and becoming a...
Great, thank you. And from our Essex's point of view, we're over £80 million that's been invested through Essex to date, and there's a large proportion of that has gone specifically into community energy projects, and the demand for individuals to invest in good projects that are really changing our landscape in terms of the sort of carbon transition seems to be as strong as ever. And so I hope that, over time with policy changes that will continue to unlock more money from retail, blended in with some of the foundation's money. And, we can really create something quite incredible in terms of change. So there's 2 clear actions there, I think, already, which will make sure that we've got links on the follow-up email. And Colin, I was going to come to you because you were talking earlier about the Scottish and Southern Energy announcement in terms of a just transition. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that, which seems to be, another small step forward.
Sure. So I mentioned our sort of approach. We give out grants, we do direct impact investments in the solutions. We also undertake shareholder engagement. So for the past 2 or 3 years, we've been engaging with all the large incumbent energy utilities around the nature of the transition and about the sort of business model resilience, how they're going to deal with a just transition, the lobbying alignment with public commitments to decarbonise, support communities, etc. And also their appetite to partner with community energy. So we've been having rounds of meetings with them all for quite a while about it. Very much a mixed bag in terms of what we get back. But one success story has been SSE. So we've been working with them to develop a just transition strategy that's very comprehensive, covers a wide range of stakeholders, from their own workers to communities they operate in, to supply chains, to consumers, etc. So they published the Just Transition Strategy yesterday, and it's great. It really is. It's the first in the world, first energy utility to produce anything like this, and it's going to direct how they transition to a net zero whilst incorporating the social dimension. And I think my favourite bit from the strategy that came out was, they produced 20 principles that's going to guide them in their decarbonisation. Principle 11 was share value with communities. And in it they say they will work with communities and local and national agencies to devise the option of a simple shared ownership structure. Now, SSE has got a large pipeline of onshore new renewables coming over the next few years. And if they can offer some quite significant community ownership stakes, that's really going to help the sector get going as well and mobilise a lot of capital. Steve was talking there about market rules and regulations still propping up the old system of kind of top-down, privatised, centralised energy. And sort of the 2014 objective for community energy, which I remember really well because it's part of the community energy strategy that I led the campaign for, and Barbara supported amongst others in the as part of the Community Energy Coalition back then. Unfortunately, in 2015, we all got binned basically when Ed Davey left, and they got rid of the green rubbish. But what we found since actually is that all of the energy utilities, whilst that sort of policy environment has got more hostile for community energy, actually all the utilities recognise that it's inevitable, this transition, which is positive. We held a round table last year with former energy utility CEOs, some of the largest in Europe, former cross-party energy ministers and Whitehall mandarins. And the conclusion from them all was that this transition is happening, and utilities need to embrace it, or simply, there's not going to be a big enough market for all of them. So I can see quite a bit of movement in this space under the Just Transition banner to actually bring in some community partnerships, which is quite something. The conclusion from this round table was policy can act as a major drag and a real pain in the arse, but it can only do it for so long. The economics of decentralized energy, the innovation that's going on, the new business models that are coming about, all of these things are going to wrestle the direction of the energy system away from policy, or at least have an equal say in it.
Yeah.
So outright ban onshore wind and outright ban solar. This is the direction of travel. It's a positive thing.
Thanks. And if I could, I'm going to come to you in a second, Matthew. So I'll give you an opportunity to add on to that. And if we could just, because we're winding up time-wise, very quickly just touch on the sort of importance of local councils as well, because that's been mentioned in the questions. And, we receive questions talking about, how do we get councils on board with investing in community renewable energy? And I think there's a desire. We have seen a number of different models actually within ethics and beyond for the councils to be participatory in the community energy space. So Matthew, you go first, and then Barbara, and then Duncan, and then we are going to just close up.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say, really, I think, we can all feel the sense of frustration because we've achieved so much almost despite the policy framework at times. But I'm really encouraged at the moment in that we are seeing chinks of light. But I think that if we'd all waited for certainty, none of us would have achieved much so far, and 40% of the UK's electricity wouldn't be coming from renewables. But at the moment, the part of the CFD, so the contract for difference consultation, which took place in the spring, there was a specific element in there consulting on how to engage and have community investment, engagement, participation in projects which qualify as, which puts a bonus on the the utilities and the developers and the community groups to be able to demonstrate that those models work. And I think that's really encouraging to see. And the reality is, we've got more than 5.5 gigawatts of renewable energy to build every year for the next 14 years if we've got a hope of delivering net zero. And yes, in the 10-point plan, onshore was mentioned. Okay, it was in the offshore box, but onshore was mentioned for its inclusion in the CFD, so it's onshore wind and solar, in the CFD, the next CFD auction in 2021. So I think that's the large scale projects there. And then we've got these private wire and direct wire models which are emerging, and with the good work that Steve's doing, there's those opportunities for that effectively for the stakeholders of the project to be the customers of the project, and that virtuous circle, and those models can work at a certain level, and let's hope the CFD comes good for the larger project. So I think there's been a lot achieved, and I think there's real prospect for growth now.
Barbara.
I just reiterate the point I made earlier, Lisa. I think that the realities of what the system is going to be like means that we need a mass market, a mass activity at the grid edge. And that means that we have to involve what I call real people, and they tend to live in real communities. So whatever happens, we have to have that activity at the grid edge. How are we going to make that happen? We're well placed to be right there when the government finally realises they need us.
And how about pulling the councils along with you?
Oh, absolutely fundamental. They are critical partners to us and always have been. We have a revolving construction fund with City Council. We've always worked with our local councils on the big innovation projects that we've been part of. And we're currently in negotiation with local institutions in Oxfordshire on local PPA. So that sort of collaboration and partnership is absolutely crucial to the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think maybe there could be some good case studies done, perhaps, that could really demonstrate to other councils the different models for trying to engage. And Duncan, just you can round us up. So if you'd like to just come in and.
Yes, thank you. It's encouraging that ministers and the regulator and the networks all agree that the future of energy, not just power, is local. And a lot of councils have really met the science by setting targets for 2030. The trouble is that the majority of them don't have a clue about how to get there. And really the embedded experts in community energy do. So mostly councils are very receptive to inputs, and amazing collaborations are happening between councils and community energy in Bristol, in Oxford, in Ockley, in London. In Plymouth, the City Council actually set up, in collaboration with community energy, Plymouth Energy Communities, and they're doing amazingly joined up work. There's a concept that is gaining more traction with Ofgem government called local area energy planning. It's always good to have a plan, and if you do it properly, you can save a lot of energy and money. Local area energy planning, we're doing some work with the Energy Systems Catapult to make sure that community energy is not just somebody nice to have along and should be consulted, but should be at the heart, at the beginning of doing energy transition strategy locally. So if you're in community energy, get in touch with your council. The other thing finally to say is that we need support to do all this. We can't just do it for the love. And the contracts for difference must be opened up to sub 5 megawatt projects, because it's just excluding all the granular stuff that communities really can do. The single turbine in Bristol that is going to be the biggest in the country, but is not going to get any kind of support from the government. It's nonsense. We need small. Genuinely is beautiful, and it must be supported. So keep browbeating your politicians to say that people and communities must be at the heart of this policy, these policies.
Well, what a perfect ending to a really interesting session. Thank you everybody for joining and listening in, and thank you everyone on the panel for really interesting inputs. I think that was really excellent. We will follow up. There was some clear actions there and people asking for how they can get on board. So we'll send out a follow-up email. And of course, you can always send us particular questions if they weren't answered today. So thanks everyone. Hope you have a great Friday. Have a lovely weekend. And thanks for listening. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.